In a world where Instagram doctors and TikTok wellness gurus offer miracle cures by the minute, it's getting harder to tell science from marketing. They promise you abs with lemon water, eternal youth with cold plunges, a cure for migraines with pink Himalayan salt. But here's the truth. Real health is boring. It's habits, not hacks. It's science, not slogans. In this video, we break down the rise of the social media health guru and why you should be skeptical when someone without a license tells you how to fix your hormones for $199.99. Welcome to the age of wellness marketing. Let's dissect the hype and bring the science back into health.
Okay, let's get into this. It feels like everywhere you turn online, just walking around, you're getting hit with health advice. Everyone seems to have the magic answer, but figuring out what's real versus what's just a really good sales pitch.
It's tough. Really tough.
Yeah, it's become incredibly difficult. And it's not by chance, right? There's psychology involved, social media blowing things up, and sometimes serious money driving it.
Absolutely. And what our source material really unpacks is how this whole environment lets a certain kind of figure thrive.
Yeah.
The research actually calls them the I know all, or IK expert.
IK expert, okay.
Yeah, it's someone who steps out claiming total certainty. They present themselves like they have all the final answers, even on stuff where, the actual scientific community is still saying, well, we're working on it.
Right, where there's still open questions.
Yeah.
And so our goal here with this deep dive, looking at the sources you pulled together, is to really understand this. We're going to focus on one specific, super viral example that the sources break down. We want to understand how these IK folks operate, why their message hits so hard right now.
And crucially.
And most importantly, pull out some real practical tips for you listening to sort of navigate this whole thing. Protect yourself from, misinformation.
Exactly. And the analysis in these sources really starts with this idea of the gray zone in medicine, in science generally, really.
The gray zone.
Yeah, these are the areas where, look, our understanding just isn't 100% complete. Research is still happening. There aren't always clear-cut answers or perfect treatments agreed on by everyone.
And these gray zones, historically, they were sort of the perfect breeding ground for these IK types, weren't they? The sources had some great examples.
Oh, definitely.
Think about weight loss. Before we had really effective medications like Ozempic now.
Yeah, exactly. What was everywhere? You had gurus pushing all sorts of supplements, teas, claiming they'd magically burn fat. The sources mentioned hydroxycut, all those detox teas, fat burner things. Because there wasn't a proven, widely accepted medical fix, that space was just wide open. But now you have drugs like Ozempic that are genuinely making a difference for a lot of people. And suddenly, that specific market for, let's say, questionable pills and teas, it's feeling the pressure.
It shrinks the gray zone a bit.
It does. Or think about the early pandemic days. COVID-19, brand new virus, so much we didn't know. Huge uncertainty.
Total gray zone.
Complete gray zone. And who jumped in? The IKA experts. Peddling miracle cures. The sources remind us about the whole hydroxychloroquine thing, or even wilder claims about, nanosilver.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
They totally capitalized on that lack of immediate scientific answers. But then science started catching up. Antivirals like Paxlovid came along, providing actual treatment.
And those specific miracle cure narratives for COVID itself kind of faded?
They did. So the sources identify this pattern. Science makes progress, fills in a gray zone with real evidence, real solutions.
And it forces the IKA experts to adapt, to shift their focus, find new areas where there's still uncertainty, or maybe where people feel vulnerable.
Precisely. And that brings us to how the sources say they've really shifted tactics now, where they're focusing today. One big area they've pivoted to, according to the research, is anti-aging.
Ah, yes. And the source material is pretty direct about this one, isn't it? Calling anti-aging basically a BS marketing term.
It's blunt.
Their point is, look, you don't cure aging. The real issue is aging well versus aging poorly. You can't actually stop the clock.
No matter how much money you throw at it. The sources mention that guy, Brian Johnson, apparently spending $2 million a year trying to slow it down. It's an example of how this area is being targeted.
Right. But the sources argue there's an even bigger shift, more significant target for them now.
Yes. And this is maybe the most crucial insight from the analysis. They are actively exploiting distrust in the healthcare system. Often very real, very understandable distrust.
And that's a key point the sources make, acknowledging that this distrust isn't imaginary. It comes from actual negative experiences people have.
Right. Things like corruption in parts of medicine, doctors making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that happens. People feeling like they pay so much for care and don't get good results. Or worse, feeling dismissed by doctors.
Feeling gaslit, yeah.
Or just feeling totally ripped off by insurance companies. These frustrations are real for a lot of people, and the sources say, look, that's understandable.
So the IKA experts aren't just finding gaps in science anymore.
No, they're finding gaps in trust. Trust in science, trust in the medical system itself. And the sources say they leverage this brilliantly. They start by tapping into your emotions,
How so?
by echoing those real negative experiences. They say, yeah, the system is frustrating, isn't it? We get it. They validate that anger, that disappointment.
So they build that connection first, make you feel heard, and then what?
Then they slide in with their own solutions.
Yeah.
Often very expensive ones. The sources call them BS solutions, frankly. But they're packaged as the better way, the shortcut. The truly personalized approach you supposedly can't get from your regular doctor. They position themselves as having some secret knowledge that scientists and doctors don't, or that maybe the institutions are even hiding from you.
Like they're pulling back the curtain on something. And the sources really emphasize how powerful this is, especially with social media.
Oh yeah, it goes viral instantly.
Yeah.
Massive reach. And then if a celebrity jumps on board, gives it their endorsement.
Huge credibility boost,
Yeah.
even if it's not warranted.
Exactly. Which leads us directly into a major case study the source material dissects.
Yeah.
Gary Brecka, particularly his connection with Dana White.
Right, that Dana White testimonial was everywhere, claiming Brecka turned his health around in, 5 months?
5 months. With really dramatic claims about blood work improving. He specifically cited his triglycerides dropping from this incredibly high number. The source quotes it as nearly 800.
Yeah, something like 764 down to 13 or maybe 143 in another quote. Huge drop.
A massive drop. Now, the analysis in the sources here is really important. They're not doubting that Dana White's health got better.
Okay.
It probably did. And the sources suggest, quite reasonably, that this improvement likely came from doing the basics. Cutting out bad habits, improving healthy ones, standard evidence-based stuff.
Right, diet, exercise, sleep.
Exactly. The skepticism highlighted in the sources is aimed squarely at the marketing, the way the story was packaged, and the extraordinary promises made about why it improved, especially using that celebrity endorsement to build a brand and sell specific, often expensive things.
Got it. So let's dig into Gary Brecka himself based on how the sources describe him. What's his background, according to the analysis?
Well, crucially, he's not a medical doctor. The sources describe him as a professional human biologist. And note, he holds a bachelor's degree in science.
Okay, so not an MD.
No. And a key point the sources raise is whether he can even legally call Dana White his patient, since he isn't a licensed physician.
Ah, interesting distinction.
And this connects to what the sources call a major red flag: the lack of professional liability.
What does that mean exactly?
It means if a licensed doctor gives you bad advice, harmful advice, they can face serious consequences: malpractice lawsuits, losing their license to practice, accountability.
Right.
Someone operating without that medical license doesn't have that same critical layer of accountability baked in, especially when they're giving advice that sounds very medical about serious health conditions. The sources really hammer this point.
That seems really important for people to understand. And the material looks closely at some of his specific claims from viral clips, right? Offering counterpoints.
Yes, it does. Let's walk through a few of the sources analyzed. First, this claim that triglyceride levels of, say, 200 or 300 are cataclysmic.
Cataclysmic? That sounds pretty extreme.
It is, and the source analysis says it's overly dramatic and medically inaccurate. Yes, levels in that range aren't ideal, they need attention, but cataclysmic risk, like the sources mention the danger of acute pancreatitis, that's associated with levels way, way higher up in the thousands.
Okay, so hyperbole, basically. What about the claim of being able to predict someone's life expectancy with, pinpoint accuracy?
The sources just call that BS and a gimmick, straight up. They do note his background was in life insurance, which might explain where that comes from.
Ah, okay.
But the analysis is clear. You simply cannot predict an exact lifespan like that. Human behavior isn't fixed, risks change, the body's incredibly complex. Data and AI can estimate risk over time, your risk of a heart attack in the next 10 years.
Sure, risk assessment.
Right, but predicting your exact date of death, The sources say that's just not scientifically possible. It's a sales tactic.
Gotcha. Okay, then there's the one linking common issues, headaches, migraines, muscle soreness, brain fog, often to a sodium deficiency, and specifically pushing pink Himalayan sea salt.
Yeah, the sources flag this one as potentially dangerous advice for the general public and lacking evidence.
Why is dangerous?
Because the analysis points out most people, especially in Western diets, actually get too much sodium, not too little. High sodium intake is a huge driver of high blood pressure, which is a massive health problem.
Right, doctors are usually telling people to cut back on salt.
Exactly. Think about the DIK dietary approaches to stop hypertension. It's specifically low in sodium and proven to help blood pressure. So, giving blanket advice to take more salt without knowing anything about an individual's health or blood pressure, the sources stress that's reckless, especially without the liability we talked about.
Makes sense. What about his claims on depression, reportedly defining it just as low serotonin, like low serotonin depression?
These sources say flatly.
Eh,
That's untrue. And it's based on a really outdated idea.
the old chemical imbalance theory.
Yeah, that simple version of it. The analysis explains that while serotonin is involved, depression is way more complex. It's multifactorial. Lots of things contribute. We don't fully understand the exact biology yet. And crucially, the sources point out, doctors do not measure serotonin levels to diagnose depression. It's just not how it works.
Okay. And related to that, the claim that SSRIs, the common antidepressants, ration serotonin.
Again, the sources say that's not accurate. SSRIs work by blocking the reuptake of serotonin, meaning they stop the body from clearing away the available serotonin too quickly, allowing it to stick around longer where it acts.
So not rationing, but making more available.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
But, and the sources circle back to this, even understanding that mechanism, we still don't fully know precisely why doing that helps alleviate depression symptoms for some people.
Still some mystery there.
There is. And the sources commend being honest about that scientific uncertainty. That's what real experts do.
Okay, one more specific claim analyzed. Waking up not feeling hungry. Supposedly that's due to really low blood sugar, good regulation, but then that causes an energy slump later, like 2-4 p.m. after you finally eat.
Right. So the sources say there's maybe a tiny grain of truth in the first part. Waking up not hungry can sometimes indicate good blood sugar control overnight.
Okay.
However, the analysis strongly pushes back on the idea that this causes the typical afternoon slump.
So what does cause it then?
The sources explain that dip in alertness is often just a normal part of our body's natural daily rhythm, the circadian rhythm. Sure, eating a really heavy lunch might make it feel worse.
Yeah, the post-lunch coma feeling.
Right. But the primary cause isn't usually connected to having had good sugar regulation hours earlier. Things like how well you slept the night before, hydration, other underlying health stuff, those are much bigger factors, according to the sources.
Interesting. So zooming out again, how did the sources describe his overall business model? How is this all structured?
Well, the analysis notes he's clearly very articulate, uses his unique background story well, and he does share some accurate information, which can make the questionable stuff seem more credible.
Builds trust.
Exactly. Then there's a slick website promoting things like a genetic test costs about $600, the sources say. And that test result then leads to recommendations for customized supplements, which you then buy separately for an extra cost.
Ah, the upsell.
And then the sources highlight these really high-ticket items, like something called the Superhuman Protocol Bundle, listed at, get this, $133,000.
Wow. $133,000. That's staggering.
It is. The sources definitely draw attention to those price points, and hidden away somewhere in all this marketing material, often in the small print.
Let me guess. A disclaimer.
You got it. The analysis emphasizes this. You'll often find language stating that the testimonials and information provided are not meant to diagnose, treat, cure, mitigate, or prevent any disease.
Even though the marketing might strongly imply otherwise.
Precisely. It's a crucial legal protection for them, an attempt to shield themselves from being accused of practicing medicine or making unproven medical claims.
Okay, so this is a lot to take in. Let's bring it back to the listener. For you listening, what are the concrete takeaways from this analysis? How can you protect yourself in this, frankly, confusing landscape? The sources boiled it down to 3 really actionable tips.
They did. First one, approach celebrity advice and endorsements with, let's say, significant skepticism, especially when it involves health or medical claims.
Right.
And be extra wary when the person giving the advice sounds like they're giving medical guidance, but doesn't have that professional liability, that medical license, which holds doctors accountable if their advice causes harm.
Okay, skepticism towards celebs and unlicensed gurus. Tip number 1. What's the second?
Be skeptical of any medical advice that just sounds way too good to be true. The sources use the classic line, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence.
And that evidence is rarely some secret only one person online knows about, right?
Almost never. If something truly revolutionary is discovered, it gets published, debated, tested by the wider scientific and medical community. It doesn't usually debut in an Instagram reel.
Good point. So too good to be true. Probably is. That's tip 2. What's the third?
Third, and this is so important, understand that very, very little health advice actually works for almost everybody. It's rare. The sources argue that when you see these dramatic health turnarounds, like with celebrities using these programs, it's often not because of the expensive fancy protocol or the unique supplements they were sold.
So what is it then?
More often than not, it's because they finally started consistently doing the basic evidence-based things that do work for most people.
The fundamentals.
Exactly. Getting enough good quality sleep, avoiding harmful habits, too much alcohol, drugs, staying connected with people, maintaining social ties, being physically active, eating a decent diet, lots of whole foods.
It's stuff we all kind of know we should be doing.
Right. The sources suggest these are usually the real engines of change, much more so than whatever specific branded protocol gets layered on top and gets all the credit.
Those really are the cornerstones, aren't they? It reminds me, the sources mentioned that anecdote about Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank,
Oh, yeah.
saying apparently that pretty much all the medical-type products pitched on that show are basically BS. It just kind of reinforces that point, doesn't it? Be skeptical when health is being sold hard.
It really does. It brings us right back to where we started, trying to separate the actual signal from all the noise out there.
Yeah. And hopefully, understanding these patterns the sources lay out, how these IKA experts operate in those gray zones, how they tap into that real distrust people feel, what their business models look like, hopefully that gives you a better filter, a tool to use in this crazy information environment.
Definitely. And it leaves us with a final thought, really building on what the sources explored. We know these IK experts thrive in scientific gray zones where answers are still developing. And we know they're really effective at exploiting that understandable distrust in the medical system. So the question for you is, moving forward, how can you get better at telling the difference between genuine scientific progress and reliable health advice versus these really convincing but ultimately deceptive claims?